Here in Acts 22, 1 through 2, and this is where Paul picks up. It says, "Brothers and fathers, hear the defense that I make now before you." And when they heard that he was addressing them in the Hebrew language, they became even more quiet, and he said, pause. So Paul thinks and believes and is correct in his belief that his purpose, even in this moment, this very, very stressful moment of where his life's on the line, he's in Roman custody. And if you don't think God's at work, think about this. He just got drug out, was beaten on by the crowd, got taken by the Romans. Now, you picture any scenario where this happens and the person that's in prison can turn to the guy in charge, is even allowed to talk to the guy in charge, because soldiers would have had him. The guy in charge is not dragging him, but is allowed to talk to him, and he says, "Hey, can I address this crowd that was just disrupting things so much that you had to be called in? Can I address this crowd that wanted to kill me? Can I just have a moment?" Can you think of any scenario where authority would let you do that? Can you imagine gathering downtown St. Pete and you've done something to stir people up? No matter how well your acts were, no matter how good you are, that you stirred up people down in St. Petersburg and they're rioting and tearing and they're trying to rip you apart and the police show up and you just tell the police captain, "Hey, would it be okay before you take me off if I address this crowd?" Yeah, I know they're angry still. It's a good chance they might set fire to the temple, but can I address them for a minute? And the guy says, "Yes, go ahead. Please be my guest." You don't think God was at work in this? He absolutely was. And so Paul takes this minute and he wants to share the truth of Christ, right? He wants to be a witness for Christ in every scenario, including this scenario. And what does he do? He speaks. I want to tell you right now, today's focus is on this, on our tongue, on our mouth. It is the most powerful instrument that we have. The most powerful instrument that we have. It can inspire. It can make people change, create a revolution. It can encourage. It can hurt. It can hurt too. Part of sharing Christ, and we'll talk about that today, is sharing parts of us, because Christ changes us. And so I share a lot about myself. And at this point, you know that, at least you should know, that I have quite a colorful past and colorful past, isn't that a sweet way of saying that you were just a horrible sinner? But before I knew Christ, I was a horrible sinner and I did a lot of horrible things. I have been in more fights in my life, physical fights, than I can count. And that's literally, there's no possible way I could count the fights that I've been in. Lost a lot of them, won a lot of them, but that's not the point. Every single fight that I've been in, I healed up from. At night when I go to bed sometimes and I think of things that I regret, it's normally not those physical things that I regret. It's things that I've said that I regret. Because things that I've said, they have more impact in a lot of ways than the physical punishment that you can take in life. I think back, and this is going to date me, and this is in no way, when I talk about my age, and I know I'm dating myself and anything, this is no way like throwing out there a hint that my birthday's this week, okay? I wasn't even going to imply that. Let's not talk about that. Thursday. All right. Let's don't discuss that. But when I was growing up, so much different than a lot of people anyway, is we had these beautiful things that most people don't understand anymore, but we had typewriters. And typewriters, we had to take typing class like in 7th and 8th grade. We had to take typing class. And I love typewriters, by the way, because there's nothing that's cleaner or looks better to me. You can print out all you want to on a printer. Nothing looks better than actually a piece of paper with fresh ink on it from a typewriter. I love it, right? But back in the day, when we made mistakes, we didn't backspace or delete or anything. We had to do this thing called whiteout. Y'all ever used whiteout? Okay, you take that whiteout and you put it on there and everything, let it dry and you can type back over it, but it don't never look the same. Like, you know what I'm saying? You turn that report in, it still has that whiteout on it, and you can hold it up to the light and look under there and you can still see the word, right? Y'all know what I'm talking about? Am I the only? Okay, all right. Whew, I felt so old for a minute. And I'm only getting older this Thursday. All right, but you can still see the word. And that makes me think about what it's like when we hurt somebody with words. Because what we do is we say something, right? We say something in an argument. We say something in anger or from our own place of hurt. And I remember this, and I've apologized so many times, and she's not looking for another apology, but I'm going to give you an instance, and maybe it'll make you mindful of some instances in your life. But one of the things I deeply regret is that when my father died, I was here in St. Petersburg. I don't regret being here in St. Petersburg. But my sister was with my father. And when I went home, I was hurting so much inside. I missed my dad so much. And I was so angry because of the loss that I can remember being in a room with Tina, and Tina said something. I wasn't even angry with her, but I lashed out at her. Almost, and I don't remember exactly the words, but there was words there that came out that were not in line with my feelings. It was almost like almost making her feel like she could have done more because she was there. But it was more about my frustrations of not being there. And understand, in my heart and logically, I can make peace with, you can't add a second to your time. You know, God's got a time, and that's when He calls us home. I know that. But I was hurting and I was missing my dad, and I said this to my sister, and you could have she was dealing with so much, you know, but you could just see her crestfallen. It just ripped her apart because she also was hurt. And she didn't need her brother coming in, her pastor brother coming in and saying something that just tore at her. And the minute I said it, I was apologizing. And that's what we do, right? When we say things out of anger or frustration or hurt or whatever it is, when we say those things, we apologize. And there's a part of us that really means it, but I'm sorry is just putting whiteout on the page. Because up under that whiteout, that's still there. That hurt, it leaves a scar. Do you know what I'm saying? Words are powerful. They're powerful. And it takes a lot of time to move on to that next page. They hurt. But they can be so amazing too. Your words, your mouth, your tongue is your most powerful instrument. And it's up to you how you use it. You know, this week I was building a lean-to on my shed. And I would go up there and I'd drill a hole. I don't know why I started out this way. And I don't know if you'll understand this or not, but I would drill a hole, and I went and got a Phillips screwdriver, and I would take the Phillips screwdriver and screw in. I might have done 2 like that, and I was like, why am I doing this? Go get the cordless drill, right? You're an idiot, Danny. You know, go get that cordless drill and go out there. So I did. I went and got a cordless drill, and it made it so much easier to do. You got to know what you're doing, right? Like if you put a drill bit in that cordless drill and you're drilling through a piece of wood, hope you know this, but if not, let me teach you a lesson. Don't put your hand up under it and hold it, right? You got to know what you're doing with it, right? You got to know that there's dangers to it. That's fine. Know how to use it. but don't keep your most powerful instrument on the shelf either. Use it. And that's exactly what Paul was doing in this instance. He was using his most powerful instrument, his words. In Acts 22, in James 3, 4, 5, it says, or take ships as an example. Although they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are steered by a very small rudder wherever the pilot wants to go. Likewise, the tongue is a small part of our body, but it makes great boast. Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. Our words are so powerful. And we're called, if we can agree that our purpose in life is to show the way to the lost, to be witnesses, to glorify God, however you want to word that, if you can agree with that, then your most powerful instrument is going to be your words. It's going to be your testimony. It resonates. As we're talking about the resurrection of Christ last week, as we're talking about Easter, okay, there's so many different things that we can do in our community with our friends, with our co-workers and everything to show Christ, right? We talked about it in Life Group this past week. One of the main ways that we can earn the right to share about Christ is through our actions. And that's important. It's important to act as a Christian, to live in a life that's worthy of our calling, right? That's what Paul says. To live in a manner that's worthy of our calling, in a manner that's worthy of Christ. To live as Christ, as we talked about in the beginning. That's great. And we can set a great example about. We can invite people to church. We can share written literature. We can do a lot of things. There's so many powerful tools out there that we can use. But none are more powerful than your testimony. Now understand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that saves lives. You don't save lives. God saves lives. And it's His Word that transforms. But there's no more thing that you have in your arsenal that's more powerful than your testimony to get them there. Because it resonates with people. It is your real proof of the active work of God in your life. And so look at what Paul did. Paul has this opportunity. They should have never let him speak. He shouldn't have been allowed in the middle of what was a riot to talk to the same people that wanted him killed, but God's at work, so he's allowed. And this is what Paul does. In Acts 22, 3 through 5, he starts sharing where I came from, right? Where I came from. In Acts 22, 3 through 5, it says, I am a Jew, born in Tarsus in Cilicia, but brought up in the city, educated at the feet of Gamaliel, according to the strict manner of the law of our fathers, being zealous for God as all of you are this day. I persecuted this way to the death, binding and delivering to prison both men and women, as the high priest and the whole council of elders can bear me witness. From them I received letters to the brothers and journeyed towards Damascus to take those who were there and bring them in bonds to Jerusalem to be punished. Now what is Paul doing? First of all, Paul's defending himself. That's the first thing that Paul's doing, because you got to remember, they brought charges up against Paul. And if you remember, I know it's been a couple of weeks, those 3 charges are this, right? They're saying that Paul is teaching the Jews to forsake their heritage. They're saying that Paul is opposed to the law. And they're saying that Paul brought a Gentile into the temple. These are the 3 charges that they're bringing against Paul. Now the last one is the most serious one, because it warrants death. If you bring a Gentile into the temple, that's heresy. It's blasphemous. It's against the law. They are going to kill him. But it's the most easy to prove too that he didn't bring a Gentile into the law. And that's just an accusation to throw out there, and he didn't do it. The other 2 are not as serious, but they are very important, because what they're basically saying is that Paul's not only teaching against the Jewish way, but they're really attacking him as if he's not a Jew. And so Paul says, okay, well, back up a minute. I can defend myself. Not only am I a Jew, Do y'all remember 2 or 3 weeks ago when Pastor Anthony said he was going to give us a gold star for perfect attendance and then he didn't? But Paul's saying, I'm a gold star Jew, right? Like I get a gold star for being a Jew. Not only was I born a Jew, but like I'm super good at it, man. I like studied under Gamaliel, who is the most renowned, famous, most respected rabbi of their day. Like it would be like for me to say, well, I wasn't under, this guy wasn't even alive, but say I'm a student of Albert Einstein. I hang out at his house every day. Like, me and Albert are so cool, I share thoughts with him and he takes credit for it, right? Like, I am that awesome. Paul was a student of his. Paul was on the fast track to be a superstar when it came to Jews. And he throws that out there. He said, like, this is where I come from. Not only am I a Jew, but I did all these things, but he also says, hey, this is not going to be just a defense because it's most important to me to live for Christ. So let me tell you where I come from. Not only am I a Jew, but I know where you come from. And I'm even worse. I pursued these Christians to the death. I persecuted them. This is my sin. This is who I am, and this is who I really am. This is where I came from. Now, when it comes to sharing our testimony, there's these 3 points that I'm going to point out today really are all you need to know. If you're ever in a point where you're like, okay, you're saying I need to share my testimony, and I'm going to earn that right to share my testimony with somebody, I really don't know how to do that. Then start right here, where I came from. This is who I am. But this is really who I am. You know, I came from Georgia. That's great. That's a fact. Maybe somebody can relate to that. Maybe they have some relatives in the South. Great. But more important than I came from Georgia, I too am a sinner. In this day and age, one of the biggest issues that anybody would tell you that they have with the church is that they feel like the people in the church are judging them, are hypocrites. That when you walk in, that they're looking at them funny, or they are talking about them, or whatever. That may not be true. That may be something that that a person feels inside. Regardless, though, it is one of the biggest complaints. And a lot of times it's because they don't see any different. Never fails. If it comes to a point where I share my testimony, every time I share it with somebody, they're like, I never would have seen that. And I'm like, I don't know how you couldn't, because I know my flaws, right? But I never would have seen that, because all they see in front of them is that I introduced myself as a pastor. That's all they see. They have no earthly idea whether or not I can relate to some of the things that they've gone through or are going through. They have no earthly idea if I understand what it means to be broken, to be shackled, enslaved by our sins and addictions. No clue. And there's a lot of people in your life had no clue if you do either. Where I came from. It's part of your testimony. Romans 3:23 says, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, right? We all have. This is the starting point. And why is this the starting point? Why do we have to be vulnerable? Why do we have to be so transparent? Because it's not about us. To live is Christ. So it's all about Christ. And if we're sharing our testimony, we're not sharing how we overcame the odds. We're sharing how God brought us through those. We must show them where we were at so we can show them where God brought us. So Paul goes on and he showed them, hey, I'm a Jew. This is where I come from. I wasn't perfect. I'm not judging you. And this is what happened. Acts 22, 6 through 16. As I was on my way and drew near to Damascus, about noon, a great light from heaven suddenly shone around me, and I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And I answered, who are you, Lord? And he said to me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you are persecuting. Now those who were with me saw the light, but did not understand the voice of the one who was speaking to me. And I said, what shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said to me, rise and go into Damascus, and there you will be told all that is appointed to you to do. And since I could not see because of the brightness of that light, I was led by the hand of those who were with me, and came into Damascus. And one Ananias, a devout man, according to the law, well spoken of by all the Jews who lived there, came to me, and standing by me said to me, Brother Saul, receive your sight. And at that very hour I received my sight and saw him. And he said, the God of our fathers appointed you to know his will, to see the righteous one, and to hear a voice from his mouth. For you will be a witness for him to everyone of what you have seen and heard. And now why do you wait? Rise and be baptized, and wash away your sins, calling on his name. Not only where I came from, but what happened. What happened to change me? Too many times we just assume, or I don't know, we don't want to speak about it or whatever, but we don't talk about what changed me. Listen, not only was I a sinner, but the person you see standing in front of you didn't get it together because of advice from Cosmopolitan. Right? Oprah's a fine lady. She did not make these changes. I didn't learn all that I needed to learn on TikTok. God changed me. The man that stands before you today is the result of an encounter with Christ. Bottom line. Bottom line. I'm not perfect. And I'm only using myself as an example because I don't want to point to other people. I'm not perfect. But the things that I do right as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as a pastor, the things that I do right in life are because of Christ. The things that I still struggle with is because of my struggle with my flesh. That's bottom line. In Ephesians 2:8 it says, for by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing, it is the gift of God. So when we're sharing our testimonies, when we're sharing words with people, when we're wanting to make change in life, we tell them what we've been through, we tell them where we're from, we tell them what we have gone through, and then we tell them what changed, our encounter with Christ, and then let's be honest with them. And this is where we fail so many times. What I face. I want to be honest with you. You're standing there and you prayed about it, you get up the nerve and you're like, man, I know I'm supposed to share with my brother. I know I'm supposed to share with my friend. I know I'm supposed to share this with my cousin. I don't know how. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to share Christ with somebody I hang out with. I don't know how to share Christ, but I know that this is the moment where I've been and what happened, and the next one's hard, because right when you see, all right, they're accepting this. They're accepting this. They really related with something I didn't think they would relate. They related to that time I was in college and I was going through this, and that seemed to make an impact. I didn't even know that would, but they seemed to connect with that. And then they understood that the change that's in me is because of Christ. And right there, I'd like to get off the hook. Because I don't want to tell them, now that you accept Christ, I'd like to tell them everything from this point on is all roses. Right? Like now, the moment you pray this prayer, now the moment you accept Jesus Christ, it's all great. You don't even ever have to look at your bank account. Again, Lori, it's all going to be fantastic, right? Money's going to pour in. Your relationships are going to work out. There's never going to be another moment where you're frustrated, or never a moment where you're going to face something and feel broken. There's never anything else that's going to come against you. You're never going to be hurt by sorrow. You're never going to be hurt by anger. None of that's going to happen. That's what I'd like to tell people. And sometimes, I don't think we mean to, but we imply that that might be the case. That everything's going to be rosy. Where I've come from, what changed me, and then let's be real about what we face. Okay, these are the three most important things that I think we can share in sharing. And Paul sure did that. Paul says in Acts 22, 17 through 21, when I had returned to Jerusalem and was praying in the temple, I fell into a trance and saw him saying to me, make haste and get out of Israel quickly, because they will not accept your testimony about me. And I said, Lord, they themselves know that in one synagogue after another I imprisoned and beat those who believed in you. And when the blood of Stephen, your witness, was being shed, I myself was standing by and approving and watching over the garments of those who killed him. And he said to me, go, for I will send you far away to the Gentiles. See, Paul is saying right here that before the encounter even happened, that he knew that they were going to come up against him. He knew what he faced, and he knew that they knew how guilty he was of sins in the past and what he had done, and that was part of it, right? I would love to tell you that there's no consequences to our actions, but that's a lie. There's always consequences to our actions. I still have and face consequences in this world because of actions that I did in the past. I still face trials that are still coming down the road. There are still hard things that I have to do. There are still hard things that I have to face. Some of them are my responsibility and some of them have nothing to do with me, but I still have to face those things. There's never a promise that we don't have to face those things. The promise is that we don't have to face those things alone. That we're no longer alone in those things. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, no temptation is overtaking you that is not common to man. God is faithful and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with temptation he will also provide the way of your escape, and that you may be able to endure it. And the idea of this temptation is not just temptation that you personally are struggling with in your flesh, but it's trials. It's everything that you face. That you will not face anything. That God will not allow you to face the things that you cannot endure. Now, you may be surprised by what you can endure, but God will not allow you to face anything that you can't, not with Him by your side. And it's important that we tell others of that, because you know what happens so many times if we don't, when we share Christ, and people are desperate for that. They're desperate for the hope of God. But when we share Christ and they think in their mind, whether we implied it, whether we didn't say it at all, but they think that by accepting Christ, that's when their life is going to get easier. And they come into church 1 or 2 weeks and their circumstances don't seem to have changed. They still have bills that are due. They are still in arguments with the same people. Some of the frustrations in life are still occurring. Their aunt who is still sick in the hospital, they're like, well, I guess I didn't do it right. I guess it didn't stick. I guess this is not real. I guess, and we don't see them again. The reality is that knowing Christ, you're still going to wake up and live in this broken world. But this broken world no longer has a hold on you. It can no longer have victory over you. And you're no longer alone. That's the reality. And that's what we need to be sharing. We need to help people to know the truth of God, to know the way as they're lost, as I was once lost, as you were once lost, or may continue to be lost. We need Christ, to live as Christ. And to do that, we don't need to put on our shelf our greatest instrument. 1 Peter 3:15 says, but in your hearts honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. And you know what he's saying? Always be ready to tell others about Christ. Amen? This morning I'm going to ask Heath to come on up. And this is my challenge for you this morning. Or my question for you this morning, really. Do you know Him? If you don't know Him, you can't live in Christ. You need life first. If If you don't have that life, this is a great moment. If you do know Him, to live in Christ means committing everything in your arsenal to Him. Are you willing this morning to make a commitment here for God?